Hi, this is Billy Gallo, and I want to introduce an awesome friend of mine. Andy and I have been friends for about 15 years ago. We met on a picture called 10th and Wolf in Pittsburgh. Andy is a very talented second unit director, writer, producer, stunt coordinator, you name it, Andy's done it. He's a dear friend of mine. I want to introduce Andy Dillon.
Hello, everyone.
How are
Thanks
you,
for having me
brother?
on. Good, I'm great. I'm happy to be on.
Well, it's an
Doing great.
honor to have you on.
Thanks, bud.
So how you holding up in New Orleans? We're recording this April 6th, and we're in the middle of the Corona pandemic. And I know New Orleans is a hot spot. So how you doing?
Yeah, we're doing well. We're just, we're staying inside and, just doing walks with the dogs every day and keeping away from bunches of people. But it's, my house is clean. My yard is very well kept right now, and but it's good. And I'm actually using this time to learn a new program, a storyboard program that I've been wanting to learn. So that's been good.
Awesome. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's great. I think it's great. For me, it's, this whole podcast is coming out of the downtime. It's something I wanted to
Yeah.
do. And, I just didn't have time because I was so busy
Right.
with the studio. And now that I have a little time, I'm jumping on board, and I'm honored to have you as a guest.
Awesome.
So Andy, I've had Manhattan Actor Studio for about 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I opened the studio, and first off, I want to get this right off the bat. I want to tell you a little story, okay, real quick. So 6 years ago, when I decided to open up the Manhattan Actor Studio, I remember I had told you, what the dream was, and I wanted to build an acting studio in Manhattan Beach, and it was kind of I was kind of going through a hard time in my life. I just lost my 11-year-old niece to brain cancer, and I lost my father to prostate cancer, and my wife had a miscarriage, and then she got diagnosed with breast cancer. So in the midst of all of that shit, I was getting bombarded. I mean, my dog got ran over by a car too, and it was probably one of the toughest years of my life. But I didn't realize back then that, in the shit of cancer, I planted seeds. The idea of opening up this Manhattan Actor Studio popped into my head. And in that was the fertilizer. I planted those seeds, and this beautiful studio came out of it where I get to touch people's lives on a daily basis. And I remember being in the studio and building the studio by myself for a month. And I was with a sledgehammer, and I was knocking down walls, and I was tearing this place apart and creating the studio. And I remember having a conversation with you, and I was about a month into it, and I was kind of beat up, tired, depressed. I was like, how the hell what am I doing here? I'm putting money into building this studio. I kept hearing, if you build it, they will come, but I was kind of at my wit's end. I had so much work ahead of me. And I remember you calling me up and saying, don't worry, I'm going to be there. I'm coming down. And I was like, okay. And I remember you showed up like on a Saturday morning, and you came with like a caravan of stunt guys and all kinds of power tools and saws and lumber. And it was one of the most magical moments for me, because I had doubts if I could actually accomplish this. I wanted to build risers for the seats, theater seats, and all this stuff. And, I was doing it by myself. I didn't know how to do it. But then you showed up with your crew, and it was amazing. I mean, words can't even describe, you brought tears to my eyes. You guys, I can't thank you enough. If it
No, of
wasn't for
course.
you, my studio, I don't think it would have been built, so I'm very grateful for what
Oh,
you
of
did.
course. That's what friends are for, man. That's what friends are for.
So, Andy, I get all the time, I get actors coming in here, or, I have some guys that come in and they're interested about, they want to be in the stunt business. And, that's not my forte. But that's why, I'm very grateful. I've reached out to you a couple of times, and you've had some conversations with, some of my actors, and kind of led them down the right path. And if any listeners out there, and they have a desire to get into the career of, the stunt business, what advice, would you say to them?
Well, it's funny. Over the years, I've had a lot of people, come up to me when I on set or just at a bar and ask me, what it is about, how do you become a stunt person? And I do believe it kind of starts. I think I've always given the advice that's sort of right on the nose, which is the step-by-step process that I took to get into the stunt business. But I think where I've maybe, you know, learned my lesson on that is that you really need to tell the person what the stunt business is before you can say, here's how you get your first job, and here's how you make it into a career. What I mean by that is that being a stuntman to most people is, you know, taking an athletic ability and turning it into being able to double an actor and fall down some stairs, or drive a car fast and crash it, or jump off a building. Well, the career has those elements to it, but it is, like any other career, something that you have to maintain on a daily basis, between the jobs, between the falling off of the buildings jobs. You know, so the first thing that I would say now, which I hadn't said to people in the past, is, do you really know what the career is about? And, you know, there are some amazing books out there that give the sort of the scope of what a stuntman's life is like. It's usually sort of life stories. And we can put that up later. I don't know how you do that, but
I'll
Hal
put 'em in
Needham
the
has
show
a,
links.
yeah, Hal Needham has a book. He was a legendary stuntman, but a different stuntman than I am today, and I will explain that later. But he has a book called The Stunt Man. There's a book by Vic Armstrong, who is still a stunt coordinator today, and more of a cutting edge stunt coordinator. That it's called The World's Greatest Stuntman, and Vic Armstrong wrote that book. But we'll put some links up later. I would start there because it really does tell you what it's like. And in a nutshell, I've been a stuntman for 29 years. And it is a great lifestyle. It is. It's a lifestyle, though. It's not just a job. I mean, all of my friends, for the most part, most of my friends are a tight-knit family of stunt people. There's, you know, you're living day to day, bettering yourself in how you compete with the stunt community, but in a friendly way, but to stay up to speed with the technologies of filmmaking. It's not just falling off a building nowadays. It's a lot more than that. And it's not something you ever become famous doing. So it's very different. Not that, you know, actors go into it because they want to be famous. I mean, most of the time, and I know, Billy, you probably teach this, that's a byproduct of it, but that's not how you go into it and why you go into it. Stunt people take a backseat to the sort of the in front of the camera feeling that a lot of actors get, and you have to do that with pride. That's a whole nother, you know, sort of thing that stunt people deal with. I mean, you know, Screen Actors Guild. I mean, stuntmen there's no Academy Award. I mean, there's an Academy Award for things that go on the TV show the day before the Academy Awards, but for stuntmen or stunt performers or action design, versus, you know, clothing design versus makeup design, there is nothing, even though in every clip of the Academy Awards, there's one piece of action in it. But as a stunt person, you take that with stride, and you that is part of being a stunt person. So I think the steps of getting into a stunt career start way in the beginning with the type of person you are, which is somebody that has to be relentless in your go-getting ability. There is no real school. There is no agent. There is no person that at the career, you know, at the schools that come to your school and say, here's how you become a stunt person. It is probably less touchable than even an actor, because there are acting schools and there are people that guide you through this process like you do, Billy. But as a stunt person, you are literally hustling the work more than I've seen a lot of careers.
When did the dream first enter your mind? When did you know you wanted to be a stuntman?
So it entered my mind very, I think, late in life, as far as when you start a career. But it's kind of a funny story. So I was in college. I was a springboard diver. So I was an acrobat, and I did well with that. but I had no idea. I mean, I graduated from college. I got out of college. I was a struggling photographer. I was teaching diving for kids at a community center. And I still, at age 28, 29, had no idea that a diver turns into a stuntman. Don't know why. And I think it's probably just because I grew up in Maryland, and I didn't grow up in, in a place like maybe New York or LA back then, when that's where those careers were. But one day I had a friend call me and said, hey, I was a high diver. I became a high diver traveling around Europe, diving off of these like 80-foot towers into these little teeny pools, making $70 a day. And somebody said to me, hey, diver, a friend of mine, SeaWorld is looking for a diver for a show down in Florida. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go jump off of that darn ladder into that dirty lake, for $70 a day. So I got the job at SeaWorld in Florida, and I moved down to Florida. And after about 6 months of diving at SeaWorld, a job opening or a job audition came up for the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular at the MGM Studios at Disney. And I was like, oh, well, I'll go try that, try it out. And so I went over there, and holy moly, I got the job as Indiana Jones. So all of a sudden I was like, pushed into learning how to use the whip, learning how to, take my high diving abilities and move them into high falling, into pads versus water. I was learning how to fight. I was learning how to, act. And my parents thought I was joining the carnival, So I was like, I just hold with me, Mom and Dad. I'm going to make this into something. I didn't know what I was going to make it into, but I was now a Disney character at, Disney World in Florida. And that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because from there, I learned what a stuntman was. I learned that the path from people being Indiana Jones or playing other characters in that show, those people that had that go-getter, quality would then say, hey, I'm going to take this to Los Angeles, because that was the spot during those periods of time down back in 2003, 2004. That was the place you needed to go. And you needed to start your hustle to become a stuntman. So I jumped in my car, stuffed my stuff in my car, and I drove out to LA knowing nobody. And that's how I started my hustle.
What does a first year look like? Is it similar to an actor's first year in Hollywood?
Yeah, I would. It's interesting. I kind of had the aspirations of being an actor at the same time when I got out there, because man, Hollywood just lights you up. The dream is right there in front of you. And so I was like, I got into acting classes, but I also, was able to get a part-time 1 day a month job at Universal Studios in the Waterworld stunt show. But I felt like the actors I was hanging out with were having the same struggles as I was for the first year. I mean, we were not working enough. Nobody had enough money. We're spending our money on classes. We're spending our money on just getting by. I mean, gosh, I remember my car was going to be repoed. I didn't have enough money to change the tire, so I'd have to. I mean, just silly stories like that. I felt it was very similar to being an actor, except for that as I started to get a day of work here and there, I started forming a very close-knit family of stunt people that I'm still best friends with today. And that network of stunt people that were hustling at the same time, we all started helping each other out. And we started telling each other where the stunt coordinators were that day. This is how you get your first job, literally. You go to the Paramount lot because you hear that Spider-Man is shooting there. You walk through security pretending like you're on your phone. This is one of my tactics. So the security doesn't look at you or ask you for your ID. If you get that far, then you text on a beeper your friend to see if it's an okay time to walk onto the set. And you walk onto the set and your friend goes, hey, the stunt coordinator's over there. And then you walk up to the stunt coordinator and you introduce yourself and you hope that the guy is in a good mood. And You do that to 10 to 15 stunt coordinators a week for about a year, and then you start to get to be known, and somebody is going to eventually say, hey, I'm going to give this guy a shot, and that's how you get your first job.
I got a question for you. So,
Yeah, yeah,
back in the day, you could get onto the lot, kind of pretending you were on the phone. I mean, I
yeah.
remember when I came out to Hollywood, and I went, I believe it was Warner Brothers, and I went to the lot, and the guard said, "Sorry, kid." I was 18, and he said, "Sorry, kid, you can't come in." And I literally walked around the building and climbed the wall with the barbed wire and the chain, and I
Yeah.
jumped over the lot, and I walked onto the
Nice,
set,
nice.
and met Kevin Bacon. Nobody knew I had just jumped on the lot. But that was
Right.
me, but now you can't quite do that. What do you
No.
recommend for first steps for actors, men now?
Well, we still do the networking thing, but really you're sort of down to chasing the stunt coordinators when they're out on locations versus being on the lots. If you can get a connection to somebody that can get you on the lot, you do. But the business has changed so much in the 20 years, 25 years that most stunt jobs right now are on locations, it seems. There's this thing to chase the tax incentives, for movies and TV shows now. The reason I'm sitting here in New Orleans right now is because New Orleans is sort of the hot spot for film here in Atlanta. And there aren't very many stages in Atlanta or in New Orleans. So 80% of the work is on locations now. So that's a good thing for when it comes down to that hustle. Yeah.
So let's go
And
back to the beginning. What are your first accomplishments, when you came out to Hollywood?
so my first my first job after hustling for a year or so, and I think I had gotten one job on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. No, sorry, I had gotten one job on the Power Rangers. I think I was probably an extra, to be honest. I can't even remember. And one day, about a year into it, a friend of mine said, hey, there's a stunt coordinator named Mike Vendrell, and he is doing a show called Angel. And the next 10 people that show up on set are going to get a job. So probably the most unsafe way to get a job. So 10 of us on that beeper chain jumped on our motorcycles, and we raced. I remember exactly, raced up to 5 to like Aqua Dulce there, and God, I was the 4th one to get there. Probably went 90, 100 miles per hour on my motorcycle, and I got a job on Angel, and that was my first real gig as a stuntman. And then my second real gig was 9 months later. So that's how it kind of started.
When can you say you're a stunt person? I mean, when did that happen for you?
So one of the pieces of advice is that I think that is very good, is that if you are going to start trying to get into this career, the one thing you need to do is make sure that financially you can support yourself, in order to be a day-to-day hustler when it comes to meeting the stunt coordinators and being consistent with being there and showing up. And there's other things I can tell you about that you want to show up to set with. But I was lucky enough to get this job at Waterworld at Universal Studios in Hollywood as a one day a week, one day a month job. That was enough to barely get me by. I would get when I got that first job on Angel, I was able to get some residuals from that here and there, but I was barely getting by. But that was enough to keep me motivated to float me through hustling these stunt coordinators on a consistent basis. If you go to Hollywood and you hustle for a week or a month or 2 months, you give it 2 months, and then you run out of money, and then you got to go get a job full time somewhere and then come back. It doesn't work well that way. You have to be consistent and persistent when it comes to proving to the stunt community that you are ready to go. Now, does that mean maybe you get a bartending job at night? Great, get a bartending job at night and burn the candle at both ends. Just make sure you stay persistent with your hustle. I think when you really can call yourself a stunt man or a stunt performer, and you've made it a career, it's when it comes to you that you have enough contacts, and those contacts are calling you on a consistent basis, that you are now not having to have that side job. I mean, that is really the key to it. But again, it doesn't mean you're making a lot of money. It just means that you're now doing this as a full-time job, marketing yourself on a daily basis to just get that next job. The thing that stuntmen today versus stuntmen back 20 years ago, and I think 20 years ago when I started, we were starting to get into this, the new age of a stuntman, and I feel like I was a pioneer when it came to this, is that stuntmen came to the table not with just a athletic ability. They came to the table with a knowledge of filmmaking. There's a thing called a previs, and a lot of people have heard of what a pre-visualization video. For a stunt person, it's for an actor, it's usually an animated thing. You know, movies, Marvel will put out a whole entire cartoon that is actually the movie prior to shooting the movie. That's called a pre-visualization, a previs. But a stunt previs is something where a stunt coordinator will have a group of guys, and man, I've done probably 200-300 of these days for free, where I come out and I rehearse a fight with the stunt coordinator, and the stunt coordinator will shoot that fight with his own camera, cut together the angles, and put together a fight scene, and present that to the director. A stunt person nowadays, it's a must to know how to edit, on Final Cut Pro or Premiere, to know how to shoot, to know camera angles, and to know how to, create the energy of a scene, and present that not only to a stunt coordinator, potentially to get a job, but if you have the job as a stunt coordinator, to present that to a director. This is a big deal. So this is the downtime we have right now and the crisis in the world. Learn how to edit. That is the thing to do. And I believe as an actor too, right, Billy? I mean, you should know how to edit. I think it's a really important skill.
You should know how to edit. You should know how to write. Why wait for somebody to create your project? I mean, you've done that. I've worked with you on a couple of projects that you've written and directed. Classified, and what was the other one we did?
Oh yeah. The mongoose.
Yeah,
the mongoose.
That was a fun project.
That was a fun one. But it's really important to come in with a skill other than the athletic ability. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, I'm not a gymnast. Well, you don't need to be a gymnast. You need to be an all-around athlete that has a skill other than just being an athlete.
What are some good skills or backgrounds people should have to if they want to do stunts?
Well, when it comes to the athletic backgrounds, it's always good if people have some acrobatic ability. It's always good if people come in with some motocross skills or some car driving skills. But it's the rock and the hard place. How do you do those? I mean, how do you get driving skills without being a stunt person? You could grow up as a motocross rider with your family. These are always good skills. But I think really the people that work the most and work consistently just have an all-around athletic ability, and they learn the different skills like fighting, like driving, like high falling. They learn those skills, basically with your group of people, with your network of stunt people that are learning at the same time. One of the first jobs I got, I went out to the park. A guy, it was on Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. And the coordinator was looking for somebody that could do Spidey ability moves. So I went out to the park and I got my 8mm video camera and I tumbled around the grass, jumped off of trees, fell down some stairs, did some Spidey moves, and I put it together in iMovie way back when. Put it on a VHS tape, and I walked up to the stunt coordinator with a VHS tape, and I said, "Here, check this out." And that's how I got my interview, and then that's how I got the job, doubling Spider-Man on Spider-Man 2. Yeah,
that's amazing. Well,
yeah,
that's the hustle, and they took massive action.
Yeah, that's the hustle. And all the time now. I mean, as a stunt coordinator, if somebody knows that I have a show, like for instance, a couple of years back, I did a show called Shadows, which was a Cloak and Dagger Marvel show, and there was a lot of acrobatics in it. The stunt performers that were hustling me the best were the ones that were showing me reels that had that kind of action on it, and they would cater their reels to that, even just going to a warehouse and shooting an acrobatic type fight and then showing me the fight. So that hustle is very important.
So who have you stunt doubled for?
In the last 25 years, I've probably doubled 100 actors, but the people that were memorable, and some of them that I've stuck with for a while, is I doubled Johnny Depp on Pirates 4. I got to do some really cool stuff, sword fighting and things like that for Johnny. I doubled Michael Fassbender in 2 X-Men movies, as well as Jonah Hex in 12 Years a Slave. He was a great guy to work with. I've doubled James Franco in Pineapple Express, and This Is the End, and a few other movies. And then I've doubled some James Caan, Bill Paxton, some pretty fun actors in the past.
Who was your favorite to double?
I think my favorite actor to stunt double was well, I think my favorite actor was Michael Fassbender to stunt double, because we really were good with each other, and it was a collaborative sort of effort between the two of us. One of my best experiences was on X-Men Days of Future Past up in Montreal with Michael. But I think my most fun experience was doubling Jack Sparrow on Pirates, just because I remember the day that I got into the outfit for the first time, and I was so nervous because Johnny was I basically had to do a little mini walking audition for Johnny, because he was heading to England and I was going to stay at Universal and finish this one sequence, which was Penelope Cruz and I running from all these mermaids who were attacking a dock. And so there was a lot of movement involved, less stunty, but more just Johnny movement, Jack Sparrow movement. So when I got the wig on in the makeup trailer and all these medallions are hanging there, I'm realizing that you can't really turn your head normally because you have this big wig. So you're like, I got to turn my head kind of like this, otherwise it hits me, and then they put all these rings on you, and I'm like, now I'm so aware of my hands. Now I can't move my head, and my hands are always in front of me. So I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden they put these boots and everything on, and it's so uncomfortable. Now you're walking around like it hurts and you can't move, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm Jack Sparrow. You just turned right into Jack Sparrow. So and I got to do my little
directors?
audition for him.
How about
directors?
Who's your favorite director?
I guess my favorite director to work for, and it sounds probably cliche, but was Steven Spielberg on Indiana Jones. And it was not only because he was so fatherly and sweet, but he was also super organized and so meticulous and knew exactly what he wanted. I've worked with many directors that I really liked. They were very good people, but they come in there very indecisive sometimes. And I think as a stunt coordinator and as somebody that has to be precise when I'm creating something, that I just respect the process when it's well developed and well organized and well prepared. That's when I respect it the most. Well, actually, on that show, it was Indiana Jones Crystal Skull, and I didn't double. I just played a German soldier. It was a dream come true. I mean, can you think of that journey that I had from my first stunt job is playing Indiana Jones. And when I played him at MGM Studios, Harrison Ford came to the show, sat in the front row, and I was playing him. And that was in 1996. And I met Harrison very briefly while dressed as Indy. Now cut to, gosh, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago? I'm in Hawaii, and I'm sitting in this military Jeep, and Harrison Ford walks up and gets into the Jeep with us. And I'm just like, you could imagine what inside my head I'm thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting next to Indiana Jones. And we started this rehearsal process where we were fighting the sword. He was fighting us in this Jeep, and while Shia LaBeouf was sword fighting in the back, in another Jeep. And 4 days into this rehearsal, finally Harrison and we were all very comfortable with him. And I had a moment where he hands me his coffee, and because he's climbing in the Jeep, and I holding his coffee, and he's sitting next to me, and I was able to say, Harrison, I played you at MGM Studios in 1996, and you were in the front row, and we met after the show. And he looked at me and he's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. He was just like, and I said, yeah. And then I had a couple other connections to him over the years. I knew some people, and I actually lived in a house up in the hills that he had built the deck onto before I had lived there. And I told him, I said, you know, I know Diamond Dave Somerville, and I lived in the A-frame across the street from him. And he said, I built the deck on your house. And I said, yep, I know that. And I tore it off, sir, because I tore that deck off. And he laughed. And then right after that was when Steven Spielberg said, okay, I need somebody to eject from this Jeep and grab it onto the bumper and then climb up, you know, so Harrison sees you in the rearview mirror and you're like the last guy standing. And Harrison Ford says, Andy's going to do that. And it was probably because I was the only guy he knew the name of in the Jeep, but but I felt like we had a connection.
So what project are you most proud of and why?
I am most proud of 12 Years a Slave. I stunt coordinated 12 Years a Slave, and I actually was also an actor on that movie. I played a character named Treach, which was an amazing experience. But I also I knew from the first time I read that script, and I knew what we were about to get into was going to be something that will you know, be taught in the schools in years to come, and it has, you know, it has been used to do so. And the reason it was such a great experience was not only because of the subject matter, but it was because of the collaboration between Michael Fassbender, myself, Chiwetel, who played Solomon in the movie, and Steve McQueen, the director. Everybody was so collaborative on that movie, and we had some very, very difficult, tricky scenes to accomplish. And here's what's funny about it. A lot of people would be like, 12 Years a Slave? What stunts were on 12 Years a Slave? There were stunts almost every day on 12 Years a Slave, because you can't put people into situations like, you know, in a noose hanging from a tree, or riding a horse, or being pulled by a carriage, or things like that. You can't do those things without a lot of preparation and a lot of, you know, a lot of design and a lot of safety built in. The reason the collaboration was so great for me in that movie is that there were parts in the script that were written, but not really sort of, the writer was great, but there were certain logistics to the action that wasn't written. For instance, quick story. When Chiwetel is hanging from the tree, if you remember the scene, he's being pulled up to the tree and yanked up over a branch. And in that moment, somebody steps out of the house and says, don't pull him up one more foot. You got to drop him. Well, no, he says, don't pull him up one more foot, step away. Well, if they stepped away from him at that point, he would fall to the ground. That's just the logistics of it, right? Just the logistics. Well, the rest of the scene was him hanging with his feet touching the ground. So, you know, the intention of the scene was all of a sudden up for grabs. Did the guy pulling him up, Paul Dano, the actor, ordering to be pulled up, did he want to torture him on his toes? Was it a happy accident? They were tying him when they said step away, and now he's on his toes. So there was a lot that went into the scene that I was able to, you know, sit with the director and say, look, we need to look at this scene. We need to talk about this scene. And my gosh, it became one of the most iconic scenes in filmmaking in my career. And it was a collaboration of how we got to the point where his toes were touching the sand, and it became a torture rather than a killing. And so that was something that was just so exciting for me.
So the early training with the bullwhip came into play with 12 Years a Slave.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I never thought that it would have, but it not only came into play on 12 Years a Slave, but I also was the whip master on Roots, the remake that happened a couple of years back, and recently I was brought up to Atlanta to work on a movie called Underground, where I taught all the guys how to use the whip there. So, well, you never know. You never know what skill is going to come to play, you know.
So what specialty did you have? You know, was it the high diving that kind of was your forte?
Yeah, you know, coming into the stunt community with that high diving ability definitely propelled me, because nobody else, you know, was coming into it with a nice, you know, ability to fall off buildings and high places. So I was getting those high fall jobs. But having one specialty really, I mean, wasn't the key, you know. I mean, the specialty is not what got my career going. What got my career going is just being an all-around sort of athlete and being good with Final Cut Pro and editing and you know, being a filmmaker. But it is, you know, like I said, it is good to come in with some athletic ability for sure.
So what project are you currently working on right now?
I am in New Orleans. We are 6 episodes into a 10 episodes Showtime series starring Bryan Cranston. It's called Your Honor, and look for it. It's intense. It's going to be great.
So if you could go back in time and go to the young Andy, the 20-year-old Andy, the, you know, the dreamer, and you could give him any advice, what would it be?
I think my advice would be to go for something and go for it strongly. I felt like I had a long period of time where I was flitting around and testing the waters in a lot of different little things. And, you know, I feel like when I finally, you know, found it, when I found what I wanted to do, I went for it. And that's what finally fulfilled me. But, you know, I don't know, it's hard. It's a hard question because you just never know, you know, where you're going to be in life. You know, at one point I thought I was going to be a photographer. I didn't go for that all the way. Well, thank God I didn't, you know? But I think it is about going for something at 100% and being persistent and consistent.
Absolutely. You know, anything that I've ever achieved in my life, you know, coming out to Hollywood at 18, becoming a successful actor, even building my studio, you know, just it took massive action to make it happen. You know,
Yeah.
when I came out here, I flew on a plane with $200. I didn't have a return ticket, you know, so failure was not an option. There was no going back.
Right.
So, you know, I truly believe that you can achieve whatever it is you want, but you have to go after it like you mean it. And,
Yeah,
you
you have
know,
to,
I'm
you
not a
have to
big
do it.
fan of, I'm not a big fan of plan Bs. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
usually find that plan Bs become plan As.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
you know, I truly believe that if you want something bad enough and you go after it with a vengeance, that you can make it happen.
Yeah. And that's
And
it.
you've
I
done
mean,
that.
a vengeance. Yes. Yes. I can truly sit here right now and say that that's what I did. You know, it took me until age 28 to say, hey, I'm going for this with a vengeance. But, you know, everybody's story is different. Doesn't matter how old you are, as long as you get to that point.
So what's next for you?
So next is, you know, the progression from a stunt coordinator to a second unit director. Briefly, what a second unit director is that you get your own crew. You shoot, you know, you shoot scenes for a movie or TV show that the director, number one, doesn't have time for. Number two, it's not their forte. So, you know, a car chase, for instance, you can imagine a car chase doesn't use the actors too often. So while the director is shooting an acting scene, we can be shooting the car chase scene because my actors are the cars. So I've been second unit directing for the last 5 years, which is very fulfilling because it's even one step closer to the creative apple that I've been, you know, going for all my career. You know, but that creative apple is the next step for me, which is directing, first unit directing. I've worked with more actors than most directors I've worked with, if that makes sense. I've been collaborative with actors and, you know, in very intense moments. So I feel like it's a really good training ground for me as a director. But I have to go for it with vengeance. I mean, nobody's just going to hand me a directing job. So I've been very close with a movie called Knuckle that I'm pushing right now with. And hopefully in the next, you know, 6 months or so, I'll have some good news about that and I'll be directing my first movie.
That's a great script.
It's a good fun one. It's one right up my alley, and it's a nice festival worthy film, I believe. And it's got some juicy roles. So
You better give me one.
yeah, you got it.
Any last words? Any advice for future stuntmen coming into Hollywood?
Um, my advice to a future stuntman coming into Hollywood and especially if it's one of your people, is feel free to reach out to me, because I needed somebody to reach out to back then. So you feel free to give my email out to anybody that's that's looking for something, and I can sort of cater some advice to their story, because everybody's got a different story. Mine's different than everybody else's, but I can also be the word of wisdom. I can say, look, and I won't candy coat it too. I'll say, hey, look, you got this in place, you got that in place, you got this in place. Are you ready to do it this way? And if you are, and you're consistent, you will become a stuntman or a stunt woman. Shit.
So what are those things that a stuntman needs? Actors need headshots, a demo reel. What are those first steps?
The first step and the trickiest step is to make sure that you're financially set up to start your hustle as a stuntman or a stunt woman, and you're able to do that and sustain yourself for at least a year. Okay, you're not going to get a job as a stuntman in the first 6 months. You're going to meet a lot of people and you're going to do a lot of things, okay? But you're not going to get a job necessarily in the first year. If you're lucky, you do, but that's not enough to support you. So financially, you got to set your life up that way. Number two is during that period of time, you're going to get your hustle on. Part of that is you have to have a stunt reel, okay? A stunt reel is not something that you have to pull footage off of TV shows or movies or go film yourself a short movie and then put yourself in it as a stuntman. You just have to go to the park, or you go to the gym, or go to the gymnastics gym, because there's a lot of open gyms out there. And you just have to put together some skills, basic fight skills, basic, acrobatic skills, maybe some falling skills. Again, you need the inside scoop to figure out where to do those things sometimes. And we can help you out with that. Of course, you have to have a headshot. You have to become SAG, Screen Actors Guild. That can be tricky, but there are some ways to get around that. That there are some tricks to the trade. I mean, New Orleans, for instance, is a right to work state. I get people SAG cards to them, 10 times a year here in New Orleans, just because they have the right to work. And then the next step is learning your hustle and having your book, your log book of stunt coordinators, and how many times you've met them and how many times you're going to meet them and how long you met them for. I mean, you have to keep track of all of that. So that's the steps that it takes. Probably similar to an actor in a lot of ways.
Andy, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Some of this advice is priceless. Success leaves clues. And that's
Yep.
why I created the show, because I want to be able to help actors, stuntmen get there faster. They don't have to make the mistakes that we made along the way. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thanks for coming on the show.
No,
Stay
thanks for
safe.
having me. I really enjoyed it.
Healthy.
Yes. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, my offer is out there. I'm always here for advice. Anybody that's a student of yours is a student of mine, Billy. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, my brother.
I love
All
you,
right.
brother.
Love you too.
Send my love to your beautiful wife.
You too.
And I will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Take care.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Please rate, review, share this with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't. Please take whatever you get from here, the golden nuggets, and apply them to your career. Go after your dreams with passion. Don't let anybody tell you it can't be done. I believe in you. Follow your dreams. I'll see you in Hollywood.